Welcome to ET Auto Farm Equipment Virtual Summit, Transforming Through COVID-19. I'm Nabil Khan and I'm joined by esteemed and illustrious speakers from the industry, and the topic for this panel discussion is the farming sector in COVID-19 opportunities and challenges. Let me introduce to you the illustrious speakers that we have today. Mr. T.R. Keswan, Chairman, FICCI, National Agriculture Committee and Group President at TAFE. Ronak Burma, Country Manager, India and SARC at CNH Industrial. We also have Mr. Satish Sharma, President, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, and whole-time Director at Apollo Tyres. We are also joined by Mr. Gaurav Saxena, President and CEO of International Business at Sonalika Tractors. We are also joined by Mr. Manish Bhatnagar, who is Managing Director at SKF India, a leading component manufacturer. Welcome to ET Auto panel discussion on farm sector in COVID opportunity and challenges. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining ET Auto. I would just like to understand, how do you see the farming sector transforming itself in the COVID time? We have seen that a lot of green shoots. So we have seen this is one of the sector that has been doing well despite COVID. What has really kept it up? I'll start with you, Mr. Keswan.
Thank you, Mr. Nabil, and good morning to all my co-panelists. Nabil, actually, if you ask me a question regarding the why this farming industry is doing well, I think, let me first say, I think we have to also thank the Almighty for what has been happening in India. As you rightly said, farming has been definitely not so much affected by the COVID because many of the rural areas were not affected. There has been migrant transfer, people moving out on the migration, but many areas the migrants also came in. I mean, if you really look at UP, Bihar, etc., there are a lot of migrants who came in. They also started doing some work on farming. MNREGA has helped farming labor. So I see that a lot of local level effectiveness has happened. More than all this, I think what has actually changed is the bumper crop what we had in the last in the March, and the general ability to procurement has increased in India, in the sense that because we also started giving additional PDF, almost 3 times the PDF across all the states, it also increased a lot of drawals from the storage areas, which also enabled a lot of procurement to take place. I've been talking to many of the state secretaries, and everybody has been telling that individually in every state the procurement has raised. All this has actually helped the farmers to get a very high level of positivity. One is the rural money. The positivity, see, farmers are always based on what the future is, what decides their mood. If they think that they had a good monsoon and the future is going to be good, they are happy to spend a little more money. And let's also be realistic that a lot of other areas where the money needs to be spent in the rural area, like marriages and other things, it's been a lot of curtailments that happen. So I also get a feeling that available surplus has actually flown into where they think putting the money is going to give them returns back. I think this is a great thing that's happened to agriculture. When it comes to agriculture industry, not only here across, the one very important thing what we have realized is that we can work digitally across all the areas. I mean, I also want to give one example, which may be little, not as a TMA president, but as TAFE also we did free cultivation. Actually, we did in Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, and part of UP. We gave free mechanization help for the small end farmers. And the entire thing, believe me, the entire thing was done digitally. And this was done by renting from the local farmer and giving it to somebody who's badly in need. And the entire operation, including the digital payment, digital mapping, digital photography, everything was done and the payments were made within a week to the renter. This, honestly, if you ask me, we would not have imagined that we will be able to do it pre-COVID. The COVID made us to think very differently. The government also chipped in. Their people started working. So I think this is the momentum I'm seeing. And I also noticed that farmers are also started accepting digital payment, the digital way of working. So this is going to be a huge change what we are going to see. And another thing which I also been discussing is that location is no more important if you really don't have to create something. If you have to create, you have to be in the factory. I mean,
Thank
I'm talking physical product creation, you have to be in the factory. But if your creation is mental stimulus and artistic or marketing or anything else, and I don't think you need to be cluttered into one place. You can actually start working from home. People have realized it, and this is going to change the way the Indian industry and the global industry on the agriculture is going to work. And very happy to note that, especially in India, we had 3.4% growth in agriculture as a GDP just between April, May, June, where everything was going down. I think this is something holding it up. So we need to thank the farmers. As I said, we need to thank the good monsoons. There is definitely a ray of hope as far as agriculture, because food is a paramount important for a large country like us. So that stability and ability of COVID to make us think differently. I think these are the points which I consider as a silver lining in the very difficult situation.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Mr. Keswan. Now I'll come to Satish ji. You are a part supplier. You supply tires to the tractors in OEM or in the aftermarket. Do you think the digital transformation has really taken shape in the rural market, where tractor is a major, product that is? It's not more of an urban but rural subject. So there, do you agree with Mr. Keswan as he pointed out that digital influence has given impetus to the growth, and then there is a surplus of economy in the rural market? What are the driver that has brought in surplus, fund in the rural market of the people? Is it that people have moved from urban to rural market after COVID scenario? How do you see it?
Then I think the rural story has been on in our country for strongly, at least in the last decade. And many organizations have been having the go rural as the mainstay strategy in their marketing functions or in their organizations. And to your point about digitalization in particular, I would think that the first business model disruptions were introduced primarily in the rural market. I recall now Tringo came from Mahindra and Mahindra. I know almost every OEM is working on disrupting the business model, uh, getting from capex to opex kind of scenario. Even in our organization, we are thinking of whether tires can be given in a rental format at some stage. So, business model disruption is very much on. And I think the fact that a real major portion of the economy is now getting contributed from rural, the center of gravity of management is definitely shifting there. And the digitalization processes have all been fast tracked during the COVID period, as we have seen in several business processes. So I think that the whole business arena is getting reimagined, and rural is very much the center of gravity in the thinking of most of the managements, because that's where the action is. Of course, as Mr. Kesman said, helped by the continuous monsoons and everything else that the government has done.
Thank you, Satish. I'll come to you, Ronak. I just want to understand, Satish just mentioned about, starting rental services for tire. That's a very good idea. And I have seen that a lot of tractor makers are going into leasing and subscription model. How do you see this evolving in India for tractor industry and outside? Do you have any example to share where it has worked well? We have seen this coming up in passenger vehicle segment also. Do you think this subscription and lease model is going to help in terms of reinstating or giving further impetus to the growth in tractor sales? Ronak, and then I'll ask Gaurav to make.
Look, the leasing model essentially, let's say, addresses the cash flow issue of a consumer, right? And his ability to afford the machinery. And that will always help, because the cost of capital is pretty high in India. I think we do it quite successfully in various parts of the world. And usually, I think we are ourselves are exploring, but it's on the heavier side of equipment. So where the machines, the large harvesters, sugarcane harvesters, and so on, where the machine cost is quite an impediment for the customer. It's a large investment, and so we are looking to do certain things that can alleviate that. But overall, I think the government has set up rental centers across the country. I think we still need the infrastructure. Still needs to be far more robust, and I think there is a huge opportunity. For certain platform companies to come out there and do this. We talk with several governments, just like Mr. Keshavan or Gaurav, etc. will be doing that, to operate on this, because it helps the farmer considerably at the time of need, and he doesn't really need to own the equipment in itself. So if we could come up with a model that actually works, wherein we have the ability to transact very efficiently across, the segment, I think it's a huge opportunity that we can unlock for the need of this country to drive productivity and mechanization.
Gaurav, just taking this discussion forward, do you see some kind of the way we have seen success right now? It has been put on hold, or the business model has been paused because of COVID. If we talk about ride hailing or ride sharing services, do you think that kind of model can be applied in tractor industry? Because we just heard that capital cost is very huge. Availability of capital or finance is a big problem in such a scenario. What are the alternatives that you guys are looking to create opportunity for tractor industry?
Actually, if you look into it, pre-COVID and the post-COVID, there are a substantial change in our business, what we are taking care for the international markets. And the challenges from the availability of the product, even the logistics, the ports were closed, the movement of containers, everything was stuck for, as a tractor industry. But in this scenario, our dependency was mainly on, because our availability was much better than any other country. So we have managed somehow to manage our, dispatches in this current scenario. But the post-COVID, the major change which we see, because our dependency was on traveling to different parts of the world and trying to see how we can manage our business. But our thought has completely changed. Now, the traveling is not required at all. And I think our efficiency has gone up. And online services and the cost optimization is helping as a product. We are more cost competitive now, because all this cost we are saving. That is making our product more cost competitive in these markets. But yes, when we were approaching after April or May, these export markets, what we have realized that every country was affected, and we have selected the countries where these are the least affected to go ahead from India. So we have selected the countries into 3 different categories: is the most severe, average, and the low severity. And we have focused on the low severity markets. That has helped us to grow despite of these issues, COVID issues. We have grown almost 30-40% in this market. So I think this is the phenomena which has changed after post-COVID for us in ITL.
Thank you so much. I'll just bring in now Mr. Bhatnagar, because he is one of the most important link in the entire business value chain. Manish, I just want to understand, how do you see the kind of growth, in terms of will it sustain for long term? Can you give us a sense from your order books, what kind of orders you have from these OEMs, and what kind of expectation these OEMs have from the market? Do you see this to sustain, or do you see it dwindling in long term, or it is going to further grow? And what are the drivers you expect?
Yeah, Nabil, thank you. We at SKF have actually a ringside view into the rural markets, which goes beyond just tractors. Yeah. So I can give you a perspective of what's happening in the rural economy beyond just tractors. And certainly, as you heard today on the call and you read in the papers, tractors are booming. Probably the only sector in the automotive space that has had growths in August compared to August last year, compared to anything else. and reasons have already been mentioned here. A couple of things I do want to say. One is that Mr. Keswan alluded to that, the investable surplus available to farmers, which we don't think of it as much. Things like not spending on marriages, not spending on get-togethers. That's a lot of money in the rural India. And that money is now flowing into equipment purchases, etc. So we should not discount that. And the other comment I want to make is, while I like the idea in theory about subscription-based models, the farmers, by their very nature, are risk-averse. They are not very prone to banking on EMIs. In fact, this morning's report from ICRA, I read this morning, which said that the government announced moratoriums on loans, and only 10% farmers have asked for moratorium on loans. They do want to pay off as much as possible. So just a couple of points to what's already been said. But the rural economy, as far as we are concerned, we are seeing very strong order books from tractors, of course, but also from lower CC two-wheelers, also from lower CC electric two-wheelers, because these are very, very heavily used in the rural economy. So by and large, we feel extremely confident on the rural economy in general, including tractors. And our order books, we should have a good year in 2020 and should carry that forward also to next year.
Thank you, Manish. You rightly pointed that rural economy is always conservative, and they always provide support to in terms of liquidity. If you talk about 2008 or crisis, also rural economy stood very strong and helped the Indian economy. Even now, only about because of demonetization, there was some impact on the rural and unorganized economy that we have in India. But they have bounced back, looks like that. That's how, the demand for tractor. Let's come back to the other change that tractor industry or automotive sector is going to face is the confusion about moving to BS4 compliant, emission. How do you see this changing the scenario in tractor space? What kind of bearing it is going to have?
Well, any emission norms changes does have some impact on the bearings, but not that much. The tractor still needs so many number of wheels there, and all those wheels still need some number of bearings there. So it doesn't change that much. Yes, to an extent, any higher emission norm has an impact on more efficiency. So better weight, which means lower weight in this case, better efficiency, which means lower friction in this case. So to that extent, it has an impact. But frankly, it has an impact less on the bearing industry than on some other components here. But I would love to hear what other people think on this call. But we are not seeing a big change in demand of the specific types of bearings based on emission norms being changes in tractors specifically. I can talk of two-wheelers and PV separately, but not in tractors as much.
Okay, Mr. Keswan, you want to add? How do you see this? Because I have heard that you guys have sought an option to extend this BS4 emission for some time. How is it working? Do you see this is going to have an impact on your sales, and what kind of cost implication is it going to have?
Let me divide this into 3 points, Mr. Nabil. One is, see, we were concerned on 3 areas. One is the affordability of a farmer. In order to, when the emission norms change, the tractor prices can go up as much as 1.5, 1.6 lakhs, even on the term 4. And compared to a 6 lakhs or a 5 lakhs tractor, it's a lot of add-on. Number 2, the other problem was, the minute you have the filters and, particulate filters, etc., there is a need for them to change it. Now, if you say an automotive, they say you change it.
Just for clarity of my viewer, you are suggesting that with the implementation of BS4 norms in a tractor, we expect the cost to go high by 20-25%. That's what you're saying.
Anything can from 20 to 25% can go up. We are given this in writing to the government, and the reasons are there. I mean, this is all the cost of components. The worst thing is that thereafter we also have what is called as owning and operating expenditure, like change of the filters, etc. I don't know whether the farmer will change a filter every 500 hours or 1,000 hours. I really don't know. Because each filter, if it's going to cost some 20,000, 25,000 rupees, he may decide not to change it and we have no control on it. This is the problem which we explained to them. And when we had a disagreement on this particular topic, I gave him an example. The Delhi uh, bus services, when they went to complete CNG, I don't know how many of you know that they have not changed their filters at all. And this is the problem. If at that kind of equipment running, people say that I don't want to do it because it's going to cost me. We were worried whether the farmers will do this. That means you need a phenomenal amount of education. Third is the farmer doesn't see this giving him any benefit. That's my bigger worry. See, if this gives him a better productivity, better this thing, he will be happy. The other, the third problem, what I always had, which I think we have been talking to people, is most of the components used in the application, whether it is electronics or the filters what I talked about, these things in the Indian application of tractor like puddling, where the tractor is almost three-fourths immersed in water. And when you see Delhi and Punjab and other areas where the temperature can become very high, the tendency is to remove the bonnet and run the tractor, which you very commonly see. It is not the temperature also, it's a mindset to the farmer, because when he has to resell a tractor, the only thing people look at it is the externally, bonnet kaisa hai. So bonnet nikal ke rakh dega, then you put the same bonnet, you put it back and you sell it, he gets a better rate. So they're happy doing it. No, these kind of practices may not go well with the kind of technology what you are trying to apply. And the other issue which adds on to the point number 3 is, see, whether it is CEV or a car or any other equipment gets the diesel or the petrol pumped directly from the pump. Unfortunately, farmers, because the pumps are not nearby, they actually carry it in drums and keep it in drums, which actually is a deterrent for any of the kind of fuel injection equipment what we are planning to use. See, till today we have been using the mechanical ones, which takes a lot of abuse, makes a poorer quality of fuel. But this kind of thing is going to also be detrimental. So we have told the government, let us try this on the 50 HP plus, which comes only to 7 to 10% of the volume. And we like to study how this is going to be accepted in the market. And then we will introduce though there is a given timeline for the introduction, next one also they said 3 years thereafter. We have been talking to the government saying that let us take a look at it. Abhito, we are going to do this effectively everything will cut in from the dealership in March 2022. Though from the factory it is October, they are given 6 months to liquidate all the stocks in the dealers. So till that time, whatever the dealer stocks are, so effectively March 2022, the larger tractors will cut in. We are going to study this and not see, unfortunately, the COVID also prevented from testing this in a big way in the field. So this is the background in which the tractor industry is working on. So we are waiting. See, we are all for the good things which going to drive what is good for the country. We also want the emission norm. We want to follow it, but we want to be 100% sure that the farmers are not affected by this. A, on the cost front, B, on the usage front. Other areas which I think we definitely look to work for is on the safety aspects, which we have been telling them, let us also look into safeties, which we need to do more. So that there is quite a few things in the basket, but this is my experience on emission. We are going to wait and see.
I just saw Saurabh trying to make a point. Yes, Saurabh. Gaurav, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a major concern in overseas business also, because our emission norms are also changing in different markets from 3A to Tier 4 final and Stage 5. And what Mr. Keshwan said, I agree with him, that it is also changing the cost substantially when you put a DPF and other devices, which takes the cost up by 25-30%. And same thing has been represented by different manufacturers in Europe and other Latin American markets. But recently, European Union, they have announced to extend this because of the COVID situation. They have extended this implementation instead of 1st January for another 1 year. So at least the manufacturers get more time for the testing and development, because we are not equipped fully to introduce stage 5 and tier 4 tractors in the market. Otherwise, our sales will be affected. So I think similarly, because the concerns are not only in India but globally. And another important area is the servicing part, because once you make your tractors with this kind of advanced technology, the tractors cannot be serviced at the small garages. It requires a different kind of equipment to service this kind of tractors, and the maintenance part, everything goes up. So I think the way some of the markets like Europe, they have taken a decision to extend for some time to give the manufacturers to develop. I think maybe in India, this may be extended, or because we have lost a lot of time in last 6 to 8 months, because we could not get the components or the testing could not happen. So this is another area, but it's a major concern for us, and we have to see how we are going to implement.
Thank you, Gaurav. I'll come to you, Ronak. You operate on a multi-location. You are a multinational company. You have to meet different emission norms in different parts of the world. India is now also inching closer to their global counterpart. How do you see this transformation? Do you also expect or want that this should be put on a hold, or you should be given a time, or there should be a particular HP category that should be given BS4? How do you see this transformation as a multinational tractor manufacturer?
Yeah.
Ronak?
So Nabil, look, there are two parts to the question, right? One is what is the benefit of us going here, and then what is the situation in India, and should it be a deferral, right? Look, with emission norms converging in India, I think it's a huge opportunity, right? Because look, we have the technology like most other players, etc. And India being a value destination for manufacturing, and it is for us like it is for many players, there's a convergence of emission norms, and that allows you to participate in emissionized countries. And therefore, there is opportunity for manufacturing out of India to enhance manufacturing out of India, okay? Most players, though, are not, if you compare the domestic business versus the export business, it's highly skewed towards the domestic business, right? And if you start to look at what the fundamentals are, Mr. Keshav was right on. What does it bring to the farmer? I mean, you have 20 to 25% cost increases, that is going to come through here. The manufacturers will do it. It's a process time. Yes, it will take more time to develop. You could have some disruptions. We will develop the technology. Some of us already have it. The issue is you have to pass on the cost. And you have to look at the landscape that we have in India, where the farmer, in most cases, in majority of the cases, are marginal farmers. So, and the tractor is one of the biggest purchases that he makes in his entire life. So if you increase the cost for that by 20 to 25%, that's a significant impact for which really he sees no benefit other than, let's say, he may have cleaner air, which he'll never notice. And look at, you're talking about 50 horsepower and above, which is the right place to do it, because below that, even more marginal farmers, and their affordability is going to be deeply impacted. But 50 horsepower and above is 8% of the market. And what we typically see when there's an emission change is that, farmers choose to go below that so that they don't have to pay that high price. What does that do? I mean, it deters the mechanization, because the implements that are required to increase productivity in India essentially require higher horsepower tractors. But because it increases the price, they then tend to move towards lower horsepower, and that then impacts mechanization in the country and drives down productivity to the potential that it could have.
Thank you, Ronak. I'll come to you, Satish. Now, we have seen there has been a lot of concern from the tire manufacturers, especially when it comes to tax anomalies that you have in tractor industry. How do you see that, changing the scenario? Do you expect something to be done there? And how do you assess that situation?
Nabil, I'm not sure I get your question right. What do you mean by
tax anomalies that you have in tire manufacturing? Like you import raw material at a lower cost compared to the finished goods. So how do you see that impacting the tractor specific market?
Tire industry suffers from an inverted duty structure. This is well known, and it's been there during all governments. And so far, we have failed to impress on the government that this needs to be corrected. And it's an ongoing discussion. And it's primarily because rubber is a sort of a lobby, strong lobby. And those interests need to be protected. Yeah, it's a seesaw kind of a thing which keeps on happening. But overall, the taxation has been coming down, and the GST was a very welcome thing in our country, which is subsuming a lot of inefficient taxes. Now, of course, the debate is more on the GST front, that like the automotives, we are also on the 28% for the larger part of the automotive section. And if that goes down, as the debate is currently, the discussion is on, and as that goes down, it will be good for everyone. But that apart, I think there is no other anomaly as far as tax is concerned.
So if I'm not wrong, about close to 60% of the population is still directly or indirectly works toward farming sector for their livelihood. And this is one sector which if we talk about the growth over the last 40, 50 years, has not been as much as a person working in the government sector or in any other business. Then why the government is taking this farming sector as equal to almost passenger vehicle or two-wheeler? Manish, your thought on this, and if Satish can also complement to this.
Nabil, I'm not sure I understand your question completely. Can you rephrase that?
I'm saying that look at the farming sector. This is probably last in the, when we talk about the levels of economic, well-being, or you're talking about the various earning categories. Farmers are at the lowest end. And if you look at the 40, 50 years, the kind of growth they have, like you talk about MSP, or you talk about anyway, they have hardly grown by 20 to 25% in terms of their income. If you talk about somebody working in government department or doing a business or anywhere, they have grown 200%, 300% in the last 40, 50 years, but their growth has remained limited. But still, the government is trying to put the tax on farm equipment as much as it is on the passenger vehicle or two-wheeler or anything that is more of luxury than necessity. Farming is necessity for everybody. So what's your thought? Why the government is thinking in this direction, and what are you guys doing? Then I'll go to Keshwan here.
Yeah, I cannot speak for what the government is thinking. Sometimes I'm not even sure if they're thinking too much about these things, honestly. And the farming segment, and I'm not a politician, neither do I want to be one, but the farming segment, the farmers typically come into focus once every 5 years at the election time, unfortunately. The most of the other sectors you mentioned, the government sector, the private sector, we have a much larger share of voice and a share of mind and a share of tax revenues for the government. So fortunately or unfortunately, we get heard a lot more. The government sometimes does not completely think through the impact its actions might have on the entire value chain. And we sometimes, being a component manufacturer, we face the brunt of it. Satish mentioned inverted duties on tires, for example. You could well argue duties on steel.
Yeah.
You can extend that to steel. Steel is used by the OEMs here. Steel is used by us in the bearings industry. We use some of the highest quality steel in the bearing to make a good bearing. That quality steel is not available in India. We have to import that. The government, on one hand, talks about Atmanirbhar Bharat, which of course we all support it. But Atmanirbhar Bharat cannot be based on a 10% import duty on steel that is not made here. So we import the steel, we make the bearings, and that import cost needs to be passed on to people on this panel, and thereafter to the people who use the tractors there. So unfortunately, and I think this panel discussion, if the government is listening to it, hopefully they will, we have to take a look at an action that the government does, what impact does it have across the entire value chain, whether it is import duties, whether it's labor reforms, whether it's land, etc. But the real answer is farmers are heard once every 5 years.
Yeah, correct. You have put it very succinctly. Mr. Keswan, why can't the industry become voice for the farmers, because you are serving them, you are getting revenue from there. Why can't you be the voice? We have never seen an industry, be it tire manufacturer, component manufacturer, or even tire makers, voicing strongly for the community.
No, no, Nabil. I think it is slightly different. I think probably we make noises, but we really don't make noises uh, openly, and we don't really talk about too much into the papers, etc. Because the purpose the Tractor Manufacturer Association made the noises about to make the changes. Let me tell you why. I think it's an interesting thing. First let me accept that farmers are once in 5 year product. They don't denial on it. But when it comes to the duties, especially when the GST came, I really have to go back a couple of years. We had a revenue neutral rate of 13.14%. That means all the components and materials we keep buying, which actually added to 13.14% as a revenue neutral when it comes to our product. Now you see the options. If you say zero GST, I have to absorb the 13.14, my cost goes up. Effectively, the farmer gets at the same rate. So we said, let us have a 12% duty so that I will not have this inverted duty structure in a big way if you only having 1.5%. That's why we actually sat with the government and settled it with 12%. Because at least nothing gets stuck anywhere, and these duties is what we are paying out to the inputs, what we are buying. Now, coming to how to help the farmers, we also gave them a suggestion. We said in Canada and Australia, there is a mechanism which allows farmers to get refund of the input GSTs or input VATs. See, the issue what the Indian government tells me is that because the farm product has zero duty, zero GST, effectively grains and other things does not have GST, there is no way of setting off, which is correct, technically correct. So what we told them is, why don't you do like Canada and Australia, and let us say a farmer pays 12% on a tractor, refund it to him. It is as good as, and remove all the other subsidies. See, you are giving a lot of other subsidies, which many of us don't even know where it goes. But when you refund the GST, or it goes to a specific farmer because the whole thing is trackable. Some government was a little averse doing it at that time, and I genuinely believe that any inputs going into farmers and they want to really help them, the only way we can do it in the Indian constitution, Indian tax laws is trying to find out a refund mechanism for them. It's not impossible. If the two governments, Canada and Australia, have done it, we can also do this. I think this will be the way. If any other things, I'll go back to what Apollo told us that, what is the idea of creating inverse duty structure which only adds on to the basic cost? Because you can't get it, so you add it back as a cost. So I think this is the only way I think things can change. Let's hope. And the one more point I wanted to bring it up here is, we talked a lot about renting equipments, etc. See, we need to categorize. There are three kinds of farmers. One are reasonably rich farmers. For them, either they buy or rent, they're not worried. The second one is a farmer who takes land from somewhere and then he farms. The third is the farmer who actually works as a labor in another farm, leaving for the time being. What I have noticed when we went for this is that it's not the question of renting. These shops don't have the money to rent it. See, suppose I wanted to rent it for, preparing the land somewhere in the month of April, May, June, and then my fuzzle is going to be only somewhere in September, October. Nobody is going to willing to wait to collect the money from him. So the whole thing of renting mechanism is skewed. The whole rental thing was created to help the so-called small and marginal farmers. They don't get help in the process. So our suggestion was, rather than subsidizing tractors, why can't you lend to rent? The lend to rent was tried in Madhya Pradesh. They had a program called, they called it the Haldar program or something. So what they did is, they gave actually money to the poor farmers to enable them rent. And that was one of the most successful programs ever had. So this is the way I look at how to increase mechanization in India, make the small and medium farmers, enable them to at least rent. Then you will find a change.
Thank you, Mr. Keswan. So before we go to another part of the discussion, that is the opportunity that is going to come up, I'll just quickly ask all of you to give point out the challenges that you see in the tractor industry right now. I'll start with you, Mr. Satish. If you could give us sense quickly, what are the challenges you see in tractor space, and do you think it is a sweet spot for you, and how much of business are you getting from tractor sector, and what is your expectation going forward?
Yeah, I think all the macros for the tractor industry are all fairly positive. And like we have discussed that the GDP, rural GDP is doing good. Farming is becoming performance driven. It is becoming precision farming. We are seeing application is taking preeminence. So in the last few years, we have developed products specifically for orchards, vineyards. All that is coming in. And as the non-agri economy grows, which it is bound to, the mechanization is also going to increase at a very rapid rate. So we see that, overall the sense of the agri economy and the tractor industry secularly, I mean, if you see the last decade and you see the decade going forward, with the help from God on the monsoon always, which is needed, I think we are in a good space. COVID also has definitely, the rural economy is actually bailed out, so-called Bharat has bailed out India, so to speak, so far. And of course, now the urban has to come to the party, otherwise it's not going to work. But given the fact that we have had good monsoon this year, and at least the visibility in the short term for up till next year Rabi crops, I think it looks pretty strong to me. So I see much more of positive, and of course the challenges are always there, but these are the challenges which have always been there, and increasingly they are getting addressed. So,
Gaurav, your thought?
Actually, we are very positive about the acceptance of the tractors and the agriculture machinery from India and various export markets, because we are taking care of the export business. So it is very, very important to look into the, as per the government, they have announced about the made in India or made for the world. But recently some regulations have come where the export benefits, which Mr. Keshwan will also agree, that they have withdrawn some MSME scheme which supports the exports. And as you know, we have to be very competitive in different overseas markets. And this benefit we pass on as a price to the customer to keep, Indian products competitive. And after this withdrawal, which is substantial percentage, we are not going to be so competitive in the market in coming months. So at one point, the government is saying that we should be, Atmanirbhar and, made for the world. But at another point is that the export benefits are getting withdrawn. So this is very important for government to look into it. If we have to support the exports from India and to be more competitive in the market.
Ronak, your thoughts. What are the challenges that you see in tractor sector?
So look, short term today it's a supply challenge, right? I mean there is no dearth of demand in the short term. Let's say in the tractor industry, it's really the supply chain that people are struggling with and trying to overcome in order to meet the supply. I think we'll overcome that. It's a question of adaptability, and I think we will overcome that. It's a short term phase. In the long term, I think all the fundamentals are very strong in terms of the farming sector, or really what I say is the rural sector, to grow, and which is the growth engine for a country like ours, right? Either we are industrialized, and if you are industrialized, you're no longer rural, right? If you're rural, you're essentially dependent on farm income. And if farm income is strong, that's what essentially drives rural demand. And rural demand, because rural India is made out of aspirers, right? So as soon as their income grows, their propensity to consume is significantly higher. And that's why it drives the level of growth that otherwise, if you double the income of someone who's sitting in New Delhi, probably his consumption level will not double, right? So fundamentally, I think we have a huge gap in terms of mechanization and productivity that can actually influence and increase farm income in India, right? And then I think, yes, industrialization is a solution. We need to get there, but then we need structural reforms, right? So it's a mix of reforms. If you hear from everybody and what they are saying, on one side, the government says, yes, we need to help the farmers. They are a key part of our society and very critical to our country. So we give them like they don't have any income tax on their income, right? On the other side, then we have policies that say, okay, you have inverted duty structures, but the people that have the holding cost are the companies, because it takes time to recover the money from the government and so on. But the companies have to pass on these costs, and then you pass on those costs to the farmer. Emission norms where I have to pass on costs to the farmers. And so when you start to see this, then there are land reforms that we need to talk about. We sort of impede the ability and the potential that rural India has to grow to its potential. And I think we really need to look, I think the government needs to look at this holistically rather than on a case-by-case basis, right?
Thank you, Ronak. I'll come to you, Manish.
Yeah, if I can just address the same question again, and I may be crystal gazing a little bit in the future here, and maybe a different perspective from what you've heard so far. I think, and I'm going to talk 5-6 years out, maybe 10 years out. A few things we see happening. One is just the entire, what we call corporatization and democratization of farming. We've seen now in Karnataka, for example, agricultural land being allowed, or in the next few months, to be allowed to be sold to non-farmers. Now that has an interesting ramification on who will the new farmers be. These are not our traditional farmers that we know so far. And the second is around speaking of tractors and not necessarily farming, we should also think about in the next 5-6 years, what will be the use of tractors in non-farm applications. We are seeing, at least the trends I see in here, that non-farming applications, mainly haulage, seems to be increasing. So if I was to look out 5-6 years, maybe 10 years, I would think that tractors would start behaving more like commercial vehicles than truly like tractors. And that has implications on things like long-term lifetime ownership of tractors, the costs of that, technology, and the entry of fleet owners, even the tractor space there. So I'm giving you some perspective of 5-6 years out, not short term, not medium term. We'll see how it plays out. This is how we see it.
Thank you so much, Manish. So what we understood so far from the discussion, the challenges that we have is of supply chain, that we need a smooth supply chain. Then we have lending for renting. That's what Mr. Keshwan has raised. Then export subsidy, Gaurav has pointed out, that is another challenge that is being then inverted duty structure, as Mr. Sharma, Satish Sharma ji has pointed out. Then we have rightly been pointed that what is going to be the future market for tractor, as Manish has said, that fleet and corporatization and industrialization of the farming sector, how will that impact? Let's move to the other segment, that is opportunity. I'll start with this only, Manish. You talked about fleet coming up in tractor industry. You're talking about industries coming into farming. Mr. Keswan, with these mega changes that we see in the future, what kind of opportunity does it form for a tractor manufacturer like you, and how much of focus are you going to give on this? Just briefly, if you could tell us.
I think, to put it very simply, I will only say that our power requirement today, what we have, is almost 40 to 50% what the world is using. So there is enough power needed. Then adequate power can come only by having more farm power. So that actually gives us a good potential for tractor production, and replacement is also something we have to consider. So that area, I'm not really finding it very difficult, very different. The other thing is, in tractor life, the haulage and the agriculture use has always gone hand in hand, for a simple reason. Agriculture is what? So 2 seasons can be 30 plus 30, 60 days, or can be maybe 80 days. So the balance, people make money by haulage and renting it out. So I think that is an area which definitely is going to continue, and that will be additional money making possibility for the farmers. I'm still looking at the farmers. Fleet operators, there will be certain, see, there are fleet operators which is very specifically looking for infrastructural work even today. That is the time we find that it is worth moving tractors on a long-term basis, long distance basis. But when it comes to renting and using people tend to use it only 10 to 20, 30 kilometers, because anything beyond that, the cost doesn't really work out today. Unless that changes, I don't see a big change happening there. But I want to look at the tractor in a very different way, because see, tractor is just a prime mover. See, let's not forget this. The actual job is done by the implement behind. So that is where I think the tractor industry need to concentrate. And most of you know that the implement industry was only allowed to be made by the small scale 5 years back. Thereafter, only it was opened out for the larger people. That is where I think we need high end of technology for it, in order to save the seeds, or whether it is fertilizers or pesticide or even water or the soil quality. You really look at high end implements and equipment. So there is a need for technology to come in. There is a need for the government to permit the technology to be quickly tested and moved. And I've been talking about this quite a bit. Today, I can test a car and put it on the road in 3 to 6 months' time in the government test labs, whereas the tractor it probably takes 1.5 years. So that these are the changes I think we are looking for. And the third thing, which probably is going to change the way we look at it, is we've been requesting that if you want to bring in technology, kindly stop the subsidies, because the subsidies are always been asking for the lowest cost based on a tender. When you go for a lowest cost based on tender, no technology will grow under it, because everybody will try to give the same thing again and again. So I think tractor and the implement together, let us take it together. A lot can be done in India. And a lot has been happening in the government. So I won't blame government completely. The Atmanirbhar Bharat, whatever they have put in, actually helps today to farmer to sell wherever he wants, and they are looking at reducing the wastage, because a lot of people don't realize that what the wastage happens, actually the farmer pays. Is not the middleman is not paying. The payment is always done by the farmer. Things are changing, but we are looking for fast tracking on technology, especially related to the implements and equipment, which will probably help India in a much bigger way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keswan. Satish, I would like to come to you. We have seen that India is the largest market when it comes to tractor, except for below 20 HP. How do you see this market transforming? Because you guys are the people where the first order comes. What are the plans the OEMs have? So just want to understand, how do you see the market moving in terms of HP and haulage? If you could give some sense in terms of category wise.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mr. Keswan that the action is more in the implements than in the actual tractor machine. And even this trend of high horsepower in the last 2-3 decades I have seen is not significantly changed. It's obviously going to change. Technology is coming in more and more. BS4 is going to usher in more. India is fundamentally a 30 to 50 horsepower tractor. There has been polarization. There has been the 20 horsepower. There has been the 70 and up. But those are, they're playing at the fringes of the game. Are they really solid trends? I do not see that. And I also see it from a tire perspective. For instance, just to give you an analogy, the entire tire space has shifted from bias technology to radial technology. Radial tires came in World War II.
Yes.
And the entire automotive ecosystem has changed to radial. But farm is still 100% bias. I mean, we've been taking the radial technology to OEMs for its adoption. But you come back to the same point which Ronak made, that it's a value market. And is the Indian farmer willing to pay the 15% differential? Tire is already an expensive product. And what does it really give? So does a tractor becomes a 4-wheel drive? When would that happen? So unless some of those fundamental technologies change, we would remain a high volume market, to my mind. We would have increasing mechanization. That is the space which it will go. And once the mechanization creeps into a certain level, and then we will find that to carry even more sophisticated implements, we need to shift to a four-wheel drive and then to radials. And then, of course, coming back to the point that Manish was making about the change that he's seeing in Karnataka, for instance, of corporatized farming, etc. As that creeps in, that is when you really require the big machines, not in a 1.5 hectare kind of a. So, as things will change fundamentally, and I think that's far off, at least in the near term or mid-term, I do not see that amount of change. But yes, mechanization is improving. People do not want to work in the farm. There is a shift of labor to other trades, and therefore mechanization is bound to happen. To that extent, the volume growth will be strong.
As we go and grow in terms of adoption of technology, that's the opportunity you're looking in the long term. Yes, coming to you, Gaurav, how do you see, what are the opportunities in terms of exports? Do you see some new markets, opening up opportunity for you as an exporter of tractors when you are going to adopt to BS4 as the government is going to implement now by 2022? So what are the opportunity you're looking in that area?
Actually, if you see, different markets have a different emission norms. When you go to the overseas markets, we have different emission norms for Europe, for Africa, or for Asian markets. So we are equipped to, meet those deadlines, which deadlines have been fixed by these different markets. But we are very confident that currently, the capacities in India and the expertise is up to 60 HP. If we have to make our presence in the overseas markets, the industry has to look into the technologies so that we can go to the higher horsepower up to 90 horsepower, 210, 120, 150 to have a better presence in the market. So yes, it is very important for the growth, not only focusing till 50, 60 HP, but we have to look into the higher horsepower tractors, which is the major markets for the Latin America or the European or Oceania markets. So industry and we are focusing on how to have a better technology to compete in the overseas markets.
Thank you, Gaurav. Manish, we are talking about autonomy, we are talking about electrification in passenger vehicle or other, automobile segment. In automotive, when it comes to farm equipment, tractors, we have seen some manufacturer have showcased electric tractor also. Some people are talking about autonomous. You as a supplier, or you are the people where the actual product starts shaping. Do you see any possibility of autonomy in tractor coming to India? I think it has high chance of adaptability when it comes to autonomy in tractor sector. Do you think it is going to happen anytime soon, and do you see any kind of opportunity there?
Yeah, I'm not very well versed with what's happening in the tractor space on electrification autonomy, but I can speak in general terms, building on our experiences from the other parts of the automotive sector. And I guess tractors will follow that eventually. What we are seeing is there is tremendous interest in both electrification and autonomous vehicles. Now, this is not just limited to things on the roads. It's also automotive vehicles not on the roads. Things like warehouses, etc., etc. The biggest challenge you have, actually, there are two challenges. One is technology adoption, and the second is supply chain. Because it's easy to produce one or two pilots, but to maintain a good supply chain, to produce series supply of that volume, needs a very, very good availability of suppliers in the country. That's where we are seeing challenges. And if you speak to CVs, PVs, or two-wheelers, they're seeing the biggest challenges there. Now, that depends, frankly, on the scale of the suppliers, the size of the market, and the adoption of technology. I think Atmanirbhar Bharat is a really good step to move that forward. And if the government follows through on all that they're saying, and I would love to hear from the other folks on this call in terms of what do they see in terms of trending for electrification. But if they see electrification or autonomy coming in force pretty quickly, I'm sure suppliers in India would be more than happy to extend and be able to build their own supply chains to meet their requirements.
But there's also a question. India has abundance of manpower or workforce available. Why will we adopt autonomy, which could certainly enhance the cost of acquisition of such vehicles. We'll talk about that also. Ronak, I would like to bring you in here. We are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are talking about making India for the world. As a multinational tire manufacturer, how do you see India becoming hub for exports of tractors for you?
Already an hub for export of tractors. I mean, 40% of our production is exported out of India, and we are looking to grow that. Not only fully built tractors, we also participate, make components for most of our plants that operate within this horsepower range of tractors. Okay, so going up to 120 horsepower is what we cater to. The opportunity for it to grow, I think, is tremendous. I think, but if the only challenge we have is structural reforms are required, right? Gaurav was talking about taking away export incentives. I mean, that's a knee-jerk reaction to the situation that we are in, and it's announced overnight. And then when we discuss, and there's always an investment pie in a company, and we look at where are you going to invest, and when you want to give the picture of investment in India, you want to be. I think investors typically look for reliability of policies and our ability to actually go and make money. I mean, this is, you invest, it's a money making, it's a for-profit organization. So if you are going to invest money, you need to be assured of your returns. If the government changes policies overnight, then I think it can become a challenge, right? So I think we have all the structural reforms in place. That India is a value destination and it can cater to export markets quite successfully. Okay, and once again, I think if the government focused on getting that right, and I'll give an example for us. We've been manufacturing here for 2 decades, and we set up a new plant in Pune with the promise of state incentives, etc. And now it's very difficult for us to claim those incentives because GST has changed, things have changed, and it's very difficult for us. So the promise that was made to the investors of recovering these incentives are now questionable, right? It doesn't give a lot of faith, for me to go back and ask again for investment here, because you are sort of on a back foot. And I think if you have, let's say, if our policies are more reliable and we can create a very good trust environment, I think there's no stopping India.
Thank you, Ronak, for being so candid and putting the right point here that long-term and sustainable policy and reforms are very important. Manish, I would come back to you. We are talking about supply chain issue. Why do we not have robust supply chain? It's not limited to tractor only. We are talking about entire automobile or automotive manufacturing value chain. We fail to have a strong supply chain. And we had huge dependence on China, which seems to have, again, we had knee-jerk reaction or the right reaction, we don't know. But that has certainly impacted. So do you think in tractor space, Mr. Keswan, also and Manish, both of you, if you could give me an answer, can India become an answer to China in tractor manufacturing supply chain? And if yes, how can we? Yeah, Mr. Keswan, start with you.
Let me come back and tell you that China has not been a great component supplier for tractors.
We had a lot of import from China in tractor also, overall tractor.
Tractor imports will be probably close to zero.
Now, yes.
No, even earlier. See, what I want you people to understand is that Indian tractors, interestingly, we develop everything less than 75 horsepower originally. Most of the technology was indigenous. So we had a strong network of local suppliers. And I think that still continues. I mean, really, because tractor industry precedes automotive industry in India. We started making tractors in 1961 and 62, where we had Eicher, TAFE, and international tractors, which is Mahindra, coming in. So we have been there for a long time. And because this is the question just now we answered to the government of India. They wanted to know how much do you import from China. If you add up and subtract everything, we found that the only thing we import from China is because Somehow the principles are sitting in China, so they're supplying from that.
What is the supply chain challenge actually? If you're saying there's no import from China, then what is the supply chain challenge that the panel is mentioning?
The supply chain challenge the panel is mentioning is because the current COVID situation. Because people are not able to, both tier 1, tier 2 manufacturers, they are not able to get the people, get the things moving. So that is a problem. And sudden increase in numbers in tractors. Also, see, this period is to be low, key as far as tractors are concerned. So as pointed by Ronak, I think the supply chain is a very short-term problem. I don't even really look it as a long-term problem as far as India is concerned.
Manish, your thought?
China's supply chain, I'll answer it two different ways. One is that I agree with Mr. Keswan. In this space, the Chinese dependence is not that relevant. As an example, for us at SKF, less than 12-13% of our total production, this is beyond just tractors, everything put together, is dependent on Chinese imports. But having said that, there is still a dependence on Chinese imports for some specific components that go into our bearings, for example, which cannot be replicated in India. I'm always a little surprised when I hear business leaders, at least recently, go and give sound bites that we're going to stop importing from China for the next 3 months, or in the next 6 months, we will de-risk or decouple from China. And I have to scratch my head and say, is that really possible? Now, these really make good populist statements, but frankly, the fact of the matter is that you cannot decouple from China even if you wanted to. Forget 3 months, not for the next 3 to 6 years. That work has to start now. So it has a much higher, if you need to decouple from China, tractors, it's irrelevant right now. For the other industries, it's part of a panel discussion on a different topic.
Thank you so much. Manish, Satish, for you, I think the situation must be different because we import a lot of tire from China.
No, I'd present an alternative case. Actually, India is fortunate to have a very mature tire industry.
Exactly, like tractors.
There's the domestic players, 4 or 5 very big ones. Multinationals have come in. We have 9 or 10 manufacturers. And we have very much operating at the world level of technology. And with BS6 coming in, all our products are like, playing, and the whole technology like changing to radial tires, like I was mentioning. So we can cater to the rest of the world. And there's enough capacity in India to be forming an alternate manufacturing source for the world. And then make in India and for the world, which is what you were saying. So tire industry could actually be a good poster boy sort of situation for in the component space for India. We boast of a good manufacturing story, good cost structure, which is fairly can do a great job in exports, provided the government was to help us with some enabling policy framework to be able to do so. It could be a very, very successful story.
But if I go by, Atma, it says that we import over 1.8 million units of TVRs from China.
See, the trade of the world is not going to stop. All that I'm trying to say is that India has a very strong manufacturing ecosystem of tires. And there are very few countries in the world, very, very strong manufacturing. And we make really great quality products. But obviously the trade will find a price point for every brand, for every manufacturer. It's a free market, and that's what is going to happen.
So if I can chime in, look, we as a tractor manufacturer, we were importing castings from China, not because of India, because we do global sourcing, and therefore we distributed the sourcing to India, etc. But in 2018, when the market was hot, then there was a government policy related to foundries in China, and then they shut down production. And so what did we do? We immediately reacted, and we insourced all the sourcing out of India. It took us a year, but we no longer are reliant on China. So the two things of this, one is, as I was alluding to before, if you have arbitrary government policies that impact a business, it's going to affect how you deal with the country, right? And then given the manufacturing base and the capabilities of our suppliers, now we are looking, and even now post-COVID, we're looking to now source out of India. So we want to increase our sourcing out of India tremendously from a global perspective. Okay, so we want an alternative to China. You know, we don't want to have the same experience that the company had with China, right? So I think that's where it's really important that the government participates with us and make sure that we create the environment so that this can happen. There is a huge opportunity, but we need to make it happen.
Certainly, this is one of the oldest sector that we have in India. Gaurav, what's your final take? Then we'll close this session.
From export point of view, if you look into supply chain, we have concern on the logistics front more, because as you know, we are exporting our tractors and agriculture machinery. So the containers, when it is stuck at different ports in different areas, and then the slow movement at the port, so a lot of damage and everything is happening. So we are very much affected currently because of the post-COVID, because of this issue in the global markets. So this is the area which, it is not that government support is required, but yes, we are passing through this phase, which slowly will come out from this.
Thank you, Gaurav. One final comment, 30 seconds for you, Mr. Keswan. Can you tell us, we are about 7.5 lakh market when it comes to tractor. What kind of projection you have for this market?
See, I'm looking at a CAGR for the next 5 years, at least around 7% plus. 7 to 8% is what I will think will be a CAGR will be. And which I think if that happens will be pretty good, really.
So in production, you expect that will cross 1 million mark this year, including domestic and exports?
Not sure, maybe slightly lower.
Okay.
But I think one thing which I think Ronak has been very, very positive in saying that is, I believe that the Indian tractor industry will be catering to more and more of the needs for the world, because all of us, whether it is our own principals or whether it is CNH or even John Deere or what Mahindra is doing in US, everybody is looking at India as a very good potential and quality supplier. So I think that's something, it is there for us to take. And I think Rona very clearly put it. What he requires the government pat and said, look, buddy, I'm going to give you something and I'm going to ensure that what I commit will happen.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining ETAuto panel discussion today. Of course, it was very in-depth and illustrious, discussion that we had. We have touched upon everything. All those viewers who have watched it, I'm sure they are going back with a lot of thoughts and ideas on the tractor industry. On the other side of this panel is coming up another exciting panel discussion. Do join in. Please ask your questions in the comment box. All the esteemed panel members are going to be available to answer your question individually. So please post your questions. Thank you so much once again for joining the panel discussion today at ETAuto Farm Equipment Summit. Thank you so much.